Marvin Hagler never backed down from legends, but his most controversial fight? He wasn't even alive for it. His biggest battles were never just in the ring. They were personal and political, and they never stopped. He was a champion who had to force the world to notice him, even after earning the crown. When he walked away, he left more questions than answers. This is the story of a fighter who gave everything, yet died with a terrible secret the world is still trying to uncover. From riots to rings. Before Marvin Hagler became marvelous, he was just a skinny kid growing up in one of the toughest places in America, Newark, New Jersey. Life there wasn't easy. He was the oldest of 6 kids, raised by a single mother in a small apartment in a neighborhood that seemed forgotten. It was the kind of place where every day felt like a fight to survive. But in 1967, things got even worse. That summer, Newark exploded in riots after police brutally beat a black cab driver. The city turned into a war zone. Buildings burned, and the streets were filled with smoke and anger. Hagler, just 13 at the time, had to lie flat on the floor with his mother and siblings for days. Bullets came through the windows. One hit the wall exactly where their heads would have been if they were standing. It was scary, but more so, it was life or death. That moment changed Hagler. His mom had seen enough, so she packed the family up and moved them to Brockton, Massachusetts, hoping for something safer. But even in a new town, Hagler never forgot what happened. That fear and that anger stuck with him, and it would later become fuel inside the ring. Now, Hagler wasn't the kind of kid people expected to be a fighter. His mom thought he might be a social worker, or maybe even a comedian, because he was always cracking jokes. But he had one dream, and one dream only, and that was boxing. His first taste of the sport came when he was just 10 years old. A local social worker named Mr. Joe handed him a pair of boxing gloves, and just like that, he was hooked. Hagler started watching old fights, pretending to be Floyd Patterson, and telling his mom, "I'm gonna be rich like him someday. I'm gonna buy you a house." But dreams don't come easy. One day, when Hagler was around 15, he got into a street fight with a local kid named Dornell Wigfall. That name would stay with him forever, because Dornell didn't just beat him up, he completely humiliated him. He took his pride and even stole his jacket. Hagler went home with a bruised face and a heart full of rage, but he didn't cry or complain. He made a choice. "I'm never going to lose like that again." So he went to a local boxing gym. But interesting enough, no one even talked to him. For a whole week, he showed up and was ignored. Not a single coach or trainer gave him a chance. So Hagler left. And that's when he found Pat and Goody Petronelli. They were 2 Italian-American brothers who used to box themselves. Unlike the first gym, the Petronellis saw something in Hagler. Not only did they train him, they absolutely believed in him. And even though he didn't trust white people much after what he'd seen in Newark, these 2 earned his respect. Under their guidance, Hagler started winning. A lot. As an amateur, he racked up a 55-1 record. That's right, 55 wins, only 1 loss. He was voted fighter of the tournament at a national competition, beating out future stars like Aaron Pryor and Leon Spinks. But even with all that talent, the boxing world didn't roll out the red carpet. Hagler was young, black, and a southpaw, meaning he was a left-handed fighter. That made people nervous and made promoters avoid him. But he didn't care. He had a chip on his shoulder and a fire in his belly. And although he was a no-name at the time, it wouldn't be long before Marvin did the unbelievable. Beating the odds and the system. Fighting other boxers was not the only thing that Hagler was doing. He was also fighting the system, the politics, the promoters, the judges, and the spotlight that always seemed to shine on somebody else. For a long time, no one wanted to give him a real chance, and that wasn't because he wasn't good. It was because he was too good, and that scared people. Hagler was black, a southpaw, and he hit like a truck. That combination made fighters and promoters nervous. One promoter even told him directly, "You're too dangerous. Nobody wants to fight you." Another legend, Joe Frazier, told him something that stuck forever. He said, "You've got 3 strikes against you. You're black, you're a southpaw, and you're good." And unfortunately, he was right. In the early days of his career, Hagler was stuck fighting the toughest guys around, the guys no one else wanted to face. He wasn't getting TV deals or big paydays, but he kept winning. He beat Roy Jones Sr., broke a contender's jaw, and left another opponent needing 40 stitches in his face. He was proving himself, fight after fight. Still, no title shot. It wasn't until his 50th fight that Hagler finally got a chance at the middleweight championship. 50 fights. Think about that. Most top fighters today get a title shot after 15 or 20 fights. Hagler had to grind his way there, the hard way. His first title shot came against Vito Antuofermo in Las Vegas, and Hagler dominated most of the fight. The crowd, the commentators, even Antuofermo himself seemed to know Hagler had done enough to win. But when the judges read the scorecards, it was a draw. A draw? After that performance? Hagler was crushed. He believed, like many fans did, that the decision had been rigged. And worse, during the last few rounds of the fight, Hagler had actually slowed down, thinking he had the win in the bag. That moment taught him a painful lesson, to never leave it to the judges. But he didn't quit, nor whine. He went back to the gym and kept fighting. Then came the chance he'd been waiting for. Another title shot, this time against Alan Minter, a British boxer who had just taken the belts from Antuofermo. The fight took place in Wembley Arena, London. The crowd was hostile, not just unfriendly, but aggressively racist. Minter had made it worse with a disgusting pre-fight comment, saying that, "No black man is going to take my title." That lit a fire under Hagler like never before. When the bell rang, Hagler fought to destroy. By the 3rd round, Minter's face was a mess, with cuts all over his face. The referee stopped the fight, and Hagler was declared the new, undisputed middleweight champion of the world. And that should have been the biggest moment of his life. But instead of cheers and celebration, the crowd rioted. They threw objects into the ring, such that police and trainers had to shield Hagler with their bodies just to get him out safely. He didn't get to raise the belts or do a victory speech. No celebration whatsoever. His limo was smashed by the angry crowd, and he was treated like a criminal for winning. So, even in victory, the system found a way to rob him of the moment. But whether they rioted or not, Hagler had finally become the champion. The relentless reign and the war that defined him. After Hagler won the middleweight title, he made it clear that nobody was taking it from him. Not judges, not promoters, and definitely not another fighter. He had waited so long, fought so hard, and been robbed so many times that when he finally became champion, he didn't just wear the belt, he defended it like it was his entire life. And honestly, it kind of was. Hagler trained like no one else. Before every fight, he would head to Cape Cod, alone. There were no distractions and no fancy hotels. He called it his jail. While other fighters enjoyed fame, women, and money, Hagler chose cold rooms, early mornings, and long runs in army boots. He didn't believe in soft training. He didn't even believe in comfort. He once said, "It's hard to get up at 5 a.m. and go for a run when you've been sleeping in silk pajamas." so he never did. In the ring, he was just as intense. After becoming champ, Hagler began one of the most dominant reigns in middleweight history. He defended his title 12 times over the next 7 years. Most fighters didn't last more than a few rounds with him in the ring. They came in confident and left bruised, bleeding, or both. He took out guys like Mustafa Hamsho twice. Both times, Hagler left his face so busted up that Hamsho needed surgery. He also knocked out William Caveman Lee Cold in the second round. And then there was Roberto Duran, one of the legendary Four Kings. Duran gave him a tough fight, seeing as he was the first to take Hagler the full 15 rounds. But he still lost. It was clear that Hagler was sending out a message to all opponents, past and future, that even though they survive a fight with him, they sure as heck won't beat him. Then came the fight that made boxing history. Hagler versus Hearns, nicknamed The War, was a 3-round explosion that fans still talk about to this day. Thomas the Hitman Hearns was taller, had a longer reach, and packed serious power. He had knocked out most of his opponents and was expected to try and outbox Hagler from a distance. But that's not what happened. From the very first bell, Hagler charged at him, and instead of backing up, Hearns stood his ground. For the next 8 minutes, the two of them traded punches like it was a life-or-death street fight. There was no feeling out or dancing around, just two warriors throwing bombs. The first round alone is considered one of the greatest in boxing history. Hagler got rocked early, but he kept pushing forward, even with the visible cut on his forehead. The fight was brutal, wild, and violent, just the way Hagler liked it. By the third round, the referee had to stop the fight to check the cut on Hagler's head. If the doctor had stopped the fight there, Hearns would have won. But the doctor let it continue, and Hagler saw his chance. He went all in. He landed a massive right hand, followed by a quick combo that dropped Hearns flat on the canvas. And just like that, it was game over, and Hagler had won one of the most unforgettable fights in boxing history. That night, he didn't just defend his title, he became a legend. After the war, Hagler still wasn't done. He kept training like a man with something to prove. Even with money, fame, and respect finally coming his way, he never took a shortcut. He fought because he loved it, and he bore the title of champion with pride. But what no one saw coming was that the biggest fight of his life was just around the corner, and that fight would change everything. The Leonard fight and the collapse that followed. By 1987, Hagler had ruled the middleweight division for 7 years. He had destroyed his challengers, outlasted legends, and earned the respect he fought so long to get. But one name still lingered in the air like unfinished business, and that name was Sugar Ray Leonard. Leonard had been the golden boy of boxing. He was fast, flashy, and loved by fans and the media. In fact, he was everything Hagler wasn't. While Hagler had to fight tooth and nail for respect, Leonard had been handed the spotlight. Hagler didn't hate Leonard, but he hated what Leonard represented. The two had never fought during Hagler's prime years. Leonard had retired due to eye problems, and while he watched Hagler destroy opponent after opponent, he stayed silent. But when Hagler finally started to slow down, Leonard saw his moment. He came out of retirement and called for a fight. Hagler wasn't interested at first. He had money, he had fame, and he was tired. But then Leonard offered a huge payday in millions, and the temptation became too strong. Hagler agreed, but the conditions were already stacked against him. Leonard wanted a larger ring so he could move more, 10-ounce gloves instead of 8-ounce, to reduce power punches, and 12 rounds, not 15. Hagler said yes to all of it. Why? because he believed none of that would matter. He had waited his whole career for the world to pay attention. Now that they were watching, he was going to show them who the real king was. But what Hagler didn't know was that while he had been relaxing in semi-retirement, Leonard had been secretly training like a madman. Not just sparring, but full, hard, behind closed doors fights to shake off the rust. When he stepped into the ring that night in April 1987, Leonard was far more prepared than Hagler expected. The fight itself was a battle of styles. Hagler came forward, like always, trying to wear Leonard down. He wanted a war. Leonard, though, had a different plan. He moved, he danced, he threw quick combinations, and then escaped before Hagler could trap him. The crowd loved it. Every time Leonard flurried, the arena exploded. It didn't matter if the punches landed clean, they looked flashy, and that impressed the judges. Hagler, meanwhile, was getting frustrated. He could be heard yelling at Leonard during the fight. He wanted Leonard to stand and trade punches, but Leonard wasn't playing that game. When the final bell rang, it was a close fight. Very close. Some thought Hagler edged it. Others thought Leonard outsmarted him. And so, the crowd was split. Then the scorecards were announced and the winner was named: Sugar Ray Leonard. Hagler stood in the ring, stunned. To him, it felt like another robbery. He had chased Leonard the whole fight, landed heavier shots, and taken more risks. But the judges had rewarded style over substance. Hagler believed that Leonard's flashy combos created the illusion of control, even if they didn't do much damage. And just like that, his belts were gone. But what made it worse wasn't just the loss, it was who beat him. Leonard, the media darling, the guy who had been cheered while Hagler had been booed, the guy who had all the advantages. That loss cut Hagler deeper than anyone realized. He blamed the judges. He blamed his longtime trainers, the Petronelli brothers, for giving him the wrong fight plan. But worst of all, he blamed himself. And then, everything started to fall apart. He had already been dealing with a family tragedy. A week before the fight, his mother-in-law passed away. He didn't go to the funeral because he stayed in training camp, and the guilt stayed with him. After the fight, Hagler became emotionally distant. He started drinking more. There were even rumors about him struggling with personal issues, including possible substance abuse. One night, in the middle of a heated argument, he got physical with his wife and even caused damage to their car. She called a divorce lawyer, and even though the case never made it to court, the damage was done, and their marriage ended. And just like that, Hagler never returned to the ring again. He begged Leonard for a rematch, but he refused. Years later, Leonard admitted that he didn't want a rematch, hinting Hagler was still too dangerous. But by then, Hagler was done. He moved to Italy, started acting in small films, learned the language, and remarried. For the first time, he found peace far from boxing. And then, years later, Leonard finally offered a rematch. By that point, Hagler had healed. He said no because he didn't want to reopen old wounds. He had already given enough, but still, that loss haunted him. Hagler had been the most dominant middleweight of his era. But one night, one decision, and one opponent changed everything. The fight with Leonard didn't just take his belts, it had taken his fire, his marriage, and the part of him that loved the sport. The champion was gone. The death, the conspiracies, and the real injustice. On March 13, 2021, the boxing world was stunned. News broke that marvelous Marvin Hagler had died suddenly at the age of 66. One of the greatest middleweights of all time was gone, just like that. There was no long illness and no warning. He just quietly passed away in New Hampshire, far from the roaring arenas where he once made history. Fans were heartbroken, and the tributes poured in. Fighters, promoters, and sports legends all honored Hagler's legacy. But within hours, that grief was interrupted by chaos. And it all started with one Instagram post from Tommy Hearns, Hagler's former rival and the man he had beaten in one of the greatest fights of all time. In the post, Hearns claimed Hagler had been taken to the ICU after experiencing side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine. The timing of the message lit a firestorm. Social media exploded, and conspiracy theories ran wild. Suddenly, Hagler's death stopped being just a tragic event and became a controversial one. Some groups quickly used the story to spread anti-vaccine narratives. They claimed Hagler's death was part of a bigger plan, that the vaccine was dangerous, that nobody was telling the truth. People who had never followed boxing were suddenly sharing his photo with wild headlines, calling it a cover-up. But the truth is, none of it was confirmed. Hagler's wife, Kay, quickly released a statement saying her husband had died peacefully at home, not in the ICU. She said no one knew if he had even been vaccinated. His son also confirmed there was no evidence the vaccine had anything to do with his passing. They begged the public not to spread false information and that they just wanted to grieve in peace. But the damage had already been done. Hagler's death had been hijacked, so instead of remembering a legend, people were arguing about politics, medicine, and conspiracies. It was the exact kind of thing Hagler would have hated. He was a man of pride, discipline, and honesty. And now, his legacy was being tangled in noise he had nothing to do with. And the real injustice is that not only did he die, but even in death, he was misunderstood. All his life, Hagler had to fight harder than others just to be seen, just to be heard. He had been overlooked, denied, doubted, and cheated. And finally, when the world was starting to give him the respect he always deserved, it ended in confusion, misinformation, and disrespect. He wasn't even given a clear, peaceful goodbye. It's one thing to face racism in the ring, or to get robbed by the judges, but to have your final moments turned into a conspiracy theory circus, that's something no champion should have to deal with. And maybe that's the terrible secret Hagler died with. Not that he had some hidden illness, or that there was some great medical mystery. But no matter how much he accomplished, no matter how many belts he held or battles he won, the world still tried to twist his story. It was like the final chapter of a book that never quite let its hero rest. Just like after the Minter fight, when his celebration was ruined by a racially charged crowd, or when the judges gave his title to Sugar Ray Leonard, or when fans and promoters ignored his greatness for years. Even in death, Hagler was denied his moment. And that's heartbreaking. So instead of asking, "What killed Marvin Hagler?" maybe the better question is, what did we do with the gift of his life? Did we appreciate him? Did we honor his journey? Or did we only cheer when it was convenient? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.